Harley Davidson just did something below the level of humiliation. How could they leak something so crucial for the survival of their brand? You won't believe how furious fans and riders are. Some of them are even refusing to recognize Harley as the company they once stood by. So, early 2025 rolls around, and what do we find out? Harley Davidson, a brand that's been limping around for years, suddenly thinks it's a genius idea to relaunch the Fat Boy. Yes, the same Fat Boy that became famous because Arnold Schwarzenegger rode it in Terminator 2 back in 1991. I mean, let's be real here, Arnold made that bike look cool, not Harley. Without that movie, half the world wouldn't even know this bike existed. But here we are, 3 decades later, and Harley is trying to milk that same nostalgia cow that's been dry for years. They didn't even bother hiding it. The leak comes out, and suddenly it's, oh look, the Grey Ghost Edition, as if bikers were sitting around begging Harley to bring back a Chrome Museum piece instead of fixing the real problems plaguing the company. And don't get me started on this Icons motorcycle collection nonsense. They're calling it a celebration of the 35th anniversary of the original Fat Boy. We're out of ideas, so let's slap a fancy finish on an old design, call it a limited edition, and hope desperate collectors throw money at it. Harley isn't celebrating history. They're recycling it like a bad movie reboot nobody asked for. And guess what? The internet wasn't buying it. Forums, Reddit threads, biker groups, you name it, people were roasting Harley alive. Words like selling nostalgia in Chrome weren't just comments. They were battle cries because everybody sees through it. This isn't innovation, this is Harley being too lazy to move forward. Of course, the hype machine had to keep spinning. Their teaser clip drops, and in just 48 hours, it racks up 1.2 million views. Sounds impressive, right? Wrong. Those weren't fans celebrating, those were people rubbernecking at the disaster. Think of it like when a car flips over on the highway. You can't look away, but you're not exactly cheering for it. And you could see the split right there. Die-hard loyalists trying to convince themselves this was worth getting excited about, and critics laughing their heads off. Honestly, Harley should have been embarrassed that a teaser video became a meme factory instead of a rally cry. Now let's dive into this so-called Grey Ghost design. First, Harley decides to make only 1,990 units. Why that number? Oh, right, because the original Fat Boy launched in 1990. Cute. Nothing screams, we're desperate for symbolism, like making production numbers match a year. And let's talk about the price. $25,399 in the US, 30,700 euros in Germany, and an eye-watering 36,500 euros in Austria and Switzerland. Who in their right mind is dropping that kind of money on a bike that's basically a dressed-up version of something you could get in the used market for a fraction of the price? Harley thinks they're Apple, selling iPhones with minor upgrades at triple the cost, but newsflash, nobody's lining up overnight outside dealerships for a Harley in 2025. Then there's the reflection finish, which sounds more like the name of a bad makeup product than motorcycle tech. They bragged about how it's a PVD coating, a fancy way of saying mirror-like chrome. Great. So they took a bike and made it shinier. Congratulations, Harley. You've reinvented tinfoil. This is the first time they've used that finish across the whole tank and fenders, and it's supposed to look futuristic. But let's be honest. It looks like something you'd be scared to ride because every smudge, scratch, or fingerprint would ruin the vibe. Imagine dropping 25 grand just to spend your weekends wiping it down like a trophy you can't touch. Of course, Harley had to sprinkle in some heritage crumbs to make collectors drool. Yellow trim here, a round air cleaner cover there, and oh, don't forget the leather seat with lace and tassel stitching. Because nothing says cutting edge in 2025 like tassels straight out of your granddad's living room lamp. And the cherry on top? An Icons medallion slapped on the tank strap, like some kind of participation trophy for buying nostalgia. Honestly, They could have thrown in a VHS copy of Terminator 2 with every purchase, and it would have been more fitting. And those Lakester wheels, solid disc aluminum wheels straight out of the 90s. Harley is basically screaming, remember the old days when we used to be relevant? Yeah, we remember, and we also remember gas was cheap, and so were you. Now let's peek under the hood, because surely Harley put some firepower in this machine to justify the price, right? Wrong. It's got the Milwaukee 8117 Custom V twin engine, which sounds fancy until you hear the numbers. Harley claims 101 horsepower at 4,800 REM and 112 pound-feet of torque at 2,000 GRPM. Let me translate that. It's actually weaker than the standard Fat Boy, which pushes 104 horsepower and 126 pound-feet. Yes, you heard that right. The overpriced collector's edition is literally less powerful than the regular model. Only Harley could manage to downgrade performance and still expect applause. It's like buying a new and improved soda only to find out it has fewer bubbles. But wait, it gets better. Cycle World did a dyno test, and the results were even more embarrassing. The Grey Ghost put out 89.8 horsepower at 4,830 RPM and 111.6 pound-feet at 6,630 RPM. So not only is it weaker than the standard Fat Boy, it's not even delivering what Harley themselves promised. That's the kind of false advertising you'd expect from a sketchy used car lot, not a company that pretends to be the king of motorcycles. Harley should be handing out apology letters with every dyno chart. Now, sure, they threw in some modern updates to sugarcoat the whole package. LED lighting, including a 7-inch headlamp, because clearly, that's what riders were missing. Brighter lights to help them see the disappointment they just bought. Ride modes like Road, Rain, and Sport? Cute, but when your bike is already underpowered, calling it Sport feels like labeling a tortoise as a racehorse. The digital and analog gauge combo with cruise control is basically Harley saying, hey, at least you'll be comfortable while realizing you overpaid. And the improved monoshock suspension? Fantastic. Now you can ride smoother into financial regret. Harley Davidson couldn't have picked a worse time to pull this stunt. The company is bleeding money, an 11% drop in revenue in 2024, and a jaw-dropping 53% decline in Q4 motorcycle shipments. That's not a hiccup. That's a full-on cardiac arrest for a brand that's supposed to be America's motorcycle icon. Imagine being Harley, watching sales nosedive harder than a rookie biker stalling out at a red light, and then thinking, the solution is, let's roll out a $25,000 nostalgia bike. Yeah, that'll fix everything. Because clearly, when your customers are struggling to afford gas, the obvious answer is to launch a Chrome Museum piece at luxury prices. Brilliant strategy, guys. And the collapse wasn't just about sales. Dealers have been shutting their doors across the US and Europe. You know what that means? Entire regions where riders can't even get their bikes serviced. Think about it. If you're a Harley rider living in some rural town and the nearest dealer just closed, your shiny Grey Ghost turns into a very expensive garage ornament. But Harley doesn't care about that. They're too busy polishing their limited edition finishes while their infrastructure crumbles. It's like hosting a housewarming party in a mansion while the foundation is literally sinking into the ground. Then comes the leadership shakeup. Jochen Seitz, the CEO who pushed his grand Rewire restructuring plan, ended up resigning in late 2024. This guy thought he was going to reinvent Harley, streamline operations, and drag them into the future. Instead, he left the company worse than he found it, with critics shredding his every move. And what does Harley do in the aftermath? They double down on nostalgia and roll out a bike that screams, "We have no clue what innovation looks like." This Grey Ghost wasn't about honoring history. It was about distracting investors from realizing the ship is still sinking. Speaking of investors, Harley stock had a cute little moment when the leak dropped, shares went up 2.4%. But let's be real, that was nothing more than a sugar rush. As soon as the pricing backlash kicked in, the numbers dipped again, because investors aren't dumb. They know slapping chrome on a fat boy isn't going to reverse a decade of decline. They saw through it just like the writers did. It's a temporary band-aid on a wound that needs surgery. Now, let's talk about the actual writers and market reaction, because this is where Harley really got roasted. Loyalists, the people who've defended this brand through thick and thin, were furious. These are bikers who stuck around when Harley was charging insane markups on parts, when their dealerships were closing, when their designs got stale. And even they were saying enough is enough. They called out Harley for charging collectors' prices during a time when the average rider can't even afford a new bike. It's tone deaf at best, predatory at worst. Harley basically walked into a struggling market and said, "Pay up or get left behind." Some biker clubs didn't hold back. They compared the $25,000 plus price tag to a used Dodge Challenger Hellcat. Let that sink in. For the price of this gray ghost, you could roll off the lot in a Hellcat, a car with 700 plus horsepower, and still have enough left over for road trips. Meanwhile, Harley's offering you tassels and a downgraded engine. That's not just losing touch with your blue-collar roots. That's setting those roots on fire and dancing on the ashes. But here's the kicker. Not everyone hated it. Collectors saw the limited 1,990 unit cap and started drooling. Some of them are already predicting resale prices will hit $40,000 to $50,000 within 5 years. And that's the problem. Harley isn't building bikes for riders anymore. They're building bikes for speculators, for people who will stash these things in climate-controlled garages and treat them like stock portfolios. The brand that once stood for freedom on the open road is now pandering to Wall Street. Congratulations, Harley. You're not a motorcycle company anymore. You're a luxury investment scam. And the polls? Oh, the polls are delicious. On Harley forums, 58% of people said the bike was beautiful, but overpriced. That's basically fans saying, "Yeah, it looks nice, but we know you're robbing us." Another 31% called it a true tribute, which is code for "we're blinded by nostalgia and will defend Harley no matter what." And then there's the honest 11% who flat out called it a cash grab. And you know what? That 11% is probably the only group Harley should actually listen to, because they're the ones not drinking the Kool-Aid. Harley may have leaked the gray ghost, but what writers really want to know is, did they just leak their future too? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because the Harley drama is only getting messier, and you won't want to miss what's coming next.